and welcome back. I'm Karen and I'm here with Kelly, and we're here to answer all of your questions, anything related to grief. And remember, our videos are coming out on Wednesdays and Saturdays. We really hope you'll subscribe. It'll help you get notified and to see them as soon as they come in. And we really do appreciate the support, of course. And feel free to comment as well. Some people have been starting to leave comments, which is great. We do like to get the feedback. So Kelly, we talk so much about all of the emotional components of what it means to be a grieving person. And I think sometimes there's, also that reminder that there's like the business side of it, and as people say, especially in the early days, it feels like a job, that they have to do. So this question specifically is, what are the things I need to do when a loved one dies?
Yes. So, such an important topic and a question that I hear a lot of clients talk about because, like you said, it is feels like a full-time job. There's so much that you have to do when somebody dies, especially a partner, when, right away. And pretty soon, within the first year, it can take a long time. And there's a lot of things that you have to do and you might not even realize. And so, the first thing I would encourage you to do is really make sure you consult an attorney because every state is a little different and there's different circumstances. So I'm in New York, may look very different than somebody in California. And so it's really important to make sure you're consulting that attorney, to finding out what you have to do, whether you even have to go through the probate process. For some people, they may not, and that would be probably a blessing if you don't. But in finding those things out is really important. So that is the first suggestion I would encourage you to do is make sure that you're checking in with an attorney, just because the advice we're giving you, we're counselors, we are not legal personnel. And so I just want to make sure you're doing everything right. We're just going by with what we've learned from our clients and some of the things that you may have not realized that is important to do. Also, the funeral home that you work with most likely will give you a handout and a packet of some of these things. And sometimes they will help with some of these things as well. So it's a good place to start as well, is talking with the funeral director, looking through that packet that you were probably given, but probably put away because you're in the midst of very early grief and feeling really overwhelmed that you don't even know what's in that packet.
Yeah.
So get that out. What I hear, and I think Karyn agrees, is usually about 15 to 20 death certificates you will need for different things, to close accounts, to transfer money. Sometimes these accounts need an original death certificate. You can always ask, you can always write in when you send it in, please return when you're completed with this. Whether you're going to get them back or not, I'm not really confident, but you can always ask. And then other places will just need a copy of the death certificate. You can always go back and ask for more, but it seems to be about 15 to 20 seems to be about accurate for what
Yeah.
you'll need.
Yeah, I agree. And really having done this just sort of recently, at first you're like, oh my gosh, why would I need so many? But I think we ended up with one left after everything.
Yep,
So yeah. And
exactly.
I didn't get too many back, but it's a good idea. I never asked.
Yeah,
I didn't know you could ask. So
yeah,
that's a
you can
good
ask
suggestion.
about
Yeah.
whether you're
Yeah.
gonna, and some of them they're gonna have to hold on to them, I'm
Yeah.
assuming, but usually once they close out the account, they can potentially return it to you. Even life
Yeah.
insurance companies can.
Yeah.
So, it is dealing with the bank and the financial accounts. Actually, I just heard something that not sure if this is accurate or not, but sometimes it's better to pay the bills right away before you consult with your bank, because then as soon as you talk to your bank, they will shut down those they may freeze those
Mm,
accounts. So
good
that's
idea.
obviously something to ask your financial person and an attorney. I don't want to give you bad advice about that, but sometimes that can happen is those accounts can get frozen pretty quickly, and then you're not able to pay the bills that you may need to pay, especially if you have things on auto pay. So much of us we have those things. And so if there's no more money in that account and the auto pay keeps going through, things could bounce, and you want to be mindful of that. Credit cards, especially if it's you had a shared account with your spouse, they will then close that account out and open up you a new account. So if you're planning on going on a trip and you're planning on using your credit card, you might want to wait until after your trip because you might not have a credit card in time.
Mm,
You want to also, make sure you're checking these accounts, that there's no unauthorized charges, that nothing is popping up, because unfortunately, sometimes this is when somebody dies is a great time to scam somebody or, hack an account. because you may not be paying attention as much. I know back in the day, and I don't know if they still talk about this, they used to talk about how during funerals, people's houses would get robbed.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be
because
a good idea to have someone who's like a friend of like a friend of the friend, not maybe as close to the family, that could come and sit in your house during the funeral
yeah,
because it
exactly,
does get
because
advertised. Yeah.
exactly. So I know some people don't even advertise, don't even won't do the obituaries with that
Yeah.
because of that. So as far as also making sure you're updating your estate plans, because say it was your spouse that died and that was your healthcare proxy, that was, your beneficiary for your insurance policies, all your 401k, all these things. You need to make sure you're updating that to reflect who the new beneficiary is. You don't want to, um, that definitely could be something down the road that could wind up in probate and take a very long time to be resolved.
Yeah.
And so just really making sure that you're looking at the life insurance, your retirement accounts, all of these accounts that you're updating those beneficiaries and updating your will.
Yeah. Okay. So
Karen,
Kelly,
anything else on this page that you think?
well, I was just thinking about the fact that, we know we're going to be doing this in a couple of parts because there's so much information here. And while it's all very important, I think people are trying to like understand what they should get to first. Would you say these are probably the most important things to address at the very beginning for
Yeah.
people?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think Social Security should probably go. We're going to talk about that
Yeah.
on, I think, the next slide, but Social Security might be, especially if you have children under the age of 18 years old, you definitely want to make sure that you're getting that appointment with Social Security. Usually it's within a couple of months you're able to get it, and it's a really easy interview and phone call. People get really worried about it, but it seems to go pretty smoothly, and they're really good because children under the age of 18 or while they're still in high school are eligible to receive dependent Social
Mm.
Security benefits, which could be a nice chunk of change for a mom whose husband died and still needs help raising their child.
Yeah.
So that is definitely something. Usually, I think funeral homes will contact Social Security for the person who's died, but this is something that you are going to have to do on your own. So I do think that, once you consult an attorney, you get those death certificates, do the Social Security, and then kind of go through this.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get through our next step here. So that's sort of what you're talking about with the Social Security. And I do think from what I've heard, um, this has gotten easier. I think there's things that have become more streamlined. I think in the past, like you could only do this by going and sitting in the Social Security office all day. And for a lot of people, I live in a county with a lot of resources stuff. Social Security is still 45 minutes away. It's not like a close by place. Um, I do think some parts of this have gotten better. And like you said, go pretty smoothly for some people, whether it's online, over the phone,
Yeah.
whatever it may be. It sounds daunting, I think, but they've got it down, I think.
Yeah. And you have to also be mindful. Like I just heard of something, somebody who worked for a railroad. And the way the railroad benefits works is they take over Social Security.
Okay.
So you don't always have to go through Social Security in an event like that, which was interesting. That was something I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
But I still encourage them to have that interview with Social Security just to make sure that they weren't leaving anything on the table that could possibly benefit their child.
Yeah. That's smart. I mean, and you get so tired of doing all the phone calls and having to keep having these conversations with people. Um, but at the same time, you really don't want to leave anything, that could be a possible source of income or, that could be a possible help to you because people need it. They
Absolutely.
really do. And that's what it's there for.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I just recently heard is that if somebody is receiving Social Security and they die, you have to pay that last month's Social Security benefit back.
Okay.
So you have to
Okay.
be mindful of that as well to know
Yeah.
that you may have to send a couple $1,000s back.
Yeah. Well, it is true. At the time of the month, the time of the year, some of those things do, you had talked about being in different states. That's absolutely true. There's going to be different things depending on where you live. But
Mhm.
the time of year does seem to make a difference too, or maybe the time of the month. So some people may find that their situation differs than another person, or if they'd had a loss already, they may find even that it's a little bit different,
Yeah,
you know.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, other things is making sure you're canceling their health insurance so you're not paying for premiums and deductibles that you don't need to. If they're receiving a pension payment, you want to make sure that you're reaching out to them to stop those payments. Otherwise, you're going to have to pay those back at some point. Um, Returning your passport for them to cancel that, just to make sure nobody is taking advantage of that and stealing that. If they were a veteran who died, contacting the VA, there is benefits, sometimes even burial benefits, right? So that is something that is a really good thing to talk to the funeral home about. Like my mom is buried in a veteran cemetery because my father is a Navy veteran. So, she's in a national cemetery. And so there's things that are included when somebody is a veteran. Not everybody qualifies for those things. So it is always good to just ask and inquire, find out if there's any survivor benefits, especially if somebody was receiving disability through the VA, there might be some additional benefits for the surviving spouse.
Okay. Yeah, I think one thing, I mean, I'll tell you what, that returning the passport again is something not a lot of people would think about. But really one of the goals I think that again, we're not as mindful of in the midst of all these other things, but wanting to avoid identity theft.
Exactly.
Because it is just so prevalent and it's just pretty common. And it's not to scare anybody. I mean, there's plenty of people that don't deal with it, but at the same time, we're trying to think of things that you can do now that could prevent further problems down the road. You don't want to be like, okay, I got this all done, and now there's this big mess. Somebody's been using your loved one's name, and because that's a lot to untangle from. That's for sure.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah,
Karyn, I'm sure you are like me and you hear all these horror stories of all the worst things that can happen. I mean, I don't know how many times I've left my office and called my dad and asked him, "Do you have this set up in your will this way? Do you have
yeah,
this?"
yeah,
Because, I hear these stories and I'm like, "Oh, we want to minimize as much as we can." Um,
absolutely.
I think that could be a whole other set of videos is, things that you should do prior to getting sick and dying. Living wills and the 5 wishes and things like that to have in place for your loved ones is so important as
It
well. But,
is.
afterwards, what can you do? That voter registration, just again, it's that identity theft and making sure that somebody isn't stealing your loved one's identity.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, Kelly, as we said, we're going to be doing this in a few different parts. So I think we'll pause here because we want everybody to have time to digest the information and to really think about it. And it is overwhelming, so doing these things in steps is going to be really important. And we're going to talk about them in a later video too, how to take care of yourself through this process because it just can be a lot. So Kelly, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for being here. Remember, we'll be back with part 2 very soon.